Journalists throughout the world are under attack, and I'm not just talking about the United States, where you have a president who is essentially threatening to take broadcasting licenses away from outlets that criticize him. I'm talking about places like Russia, where just recently a journalist who was extremely critical of the Kremlin was stabbed in the neck. Her name is Tatyana Feldenhauer, and she worked for a radio station known as Echo Moskvy. And luckily, she has not died as a result of the attack. She is in critical condition. She was rushed to the hospital and received treatment, and she had to be placed in a medically induced coma. However, there is hope that she will survive. But again, she has been openly critical of the Kremlin, and we know that Putin has in the past targeted journalists and in some cases even allegedly murdered them for being too critical of the Kremlin. Now, Tatyana Feldenhauer, deputy editor-in-chief and co-host of a popular morning show for the station, was rushed to the hospital and has been breathing through a tube. The photos that I'm about to show you are graphic. They show a little blood, so I want to give you a little warning. But here are a few photos of the scene. Luckily, they were able to get the suspect in custody. He's a 48-year-old by the name of Boris Gritz. He lived in Israel since 2003 and actually returned back to Russia about a month ago. He has been telling authorities that he believes he had been communicating with the journalist telepathically.
So look, I don't believe that. So not that I don't believe that he was communicating that way. Of course he wasn't. I don't believe that that's his true motivation. It's way too convenient. This attack came a little less than 2 weeks after state-owned Russia 24 had called Echo Moskvy, where she works, a foreign agent, and Feldenhauer was specifically ID'd in the show.
Yes.
So they said, okay, she's the one who's doing this, and it's a foreign, and these guys are foreign agents. And then conveniently, right afterwards, a guy who happens to be telepathically communicating, so-called, with that particular journalist. Because if you're actually psychotic or having a breakdown, it could have been any journalist, it could have been a non-journalist. He happened to be psychotic about the same exact journalist that state-owned TV 2 weeks ago had said was the problem. No way. Along with the context of how many murdered and attacked journalists in Russia.
I know, exactly. There's a long list of journalists who have been targeted, who have mysteriously disappeared, who were mysteriously murdered in some way. A lot of these cases go unsolved. And so, the authorities are the ones that are saying that this man alleged that he was communicating with her telepathically. But who are we to believe what the Russian authorities have to say while they're investigating this case? Especially when you consider the large volume of journalists who do get murdered in Russia and the cases go unsolved. And so look, obviously there's a lot of speculation going on here because we don't know the exact facts of what happened. All we know is this 48-year-old man broke into the radio station, was able to get past the security guard by pepper spraying him in the face, and then immediately went into the newsroom and attacked this specific journalist by stabbing her in the neck. And again, luckily she survived, but she is in critical condition.
And this is not the first time one of their journalists has been targeted. Yulia Latnina has now fled Russia after a series of attacks. So if you are a Putin opponent, and it doesn't even have to be political, it could just be in the press, you point out things that he is doing wrong. Watch out, there's some chance that someone will for some reason try to murder you. But there's a lot of coincidences in Russia. Now, after Donald Trump's election, a bunch of diplomats died all mysteriously, all almost right away after the election. And one of the guys that was targeted, they said, oh, what an unlucky break. He was walking along in the street when a couch fell off a roof or something and hit, or out of a window and happened to crush him. Lots of unlucky breaks going around in Russia. So when Trump goes around saying that, oh, Putin is what do you mean? He compliments me, he's a good guy. Putin is not a good guy.
No, Putin's a terrible person. And if you're in Russia and have the audacity to say that as a journalist, there might be some serious consequences, losing your life being one of them.
Sorry, two more things real quick here. One is, I can't compliment those brave Russian journalists enough.
Yeah.
I mean, the heart they have, the soul, the spirit that they have, knowing the dangers, to go out and criticize Putin in Russia. That's amazing. It's amazing courage. They're absolute heroes to the whole world. And for this guy, the suspect, tick, 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 tick. What happens in situations like this? Usually they get Lee Harvey Oswalded. So if that guy happens to die in custody, maybe he felt so bad he committed suicide, you shouldn't be surprised, I'm telling you ahead of time, because if he knows things, he's gotta go. I don't know if he was supposed to survive the attack or not.
Yeah, look, this is the reason why when we covered that poll that Politico did regarding the percentage of Americans who believe that the news just makes up stories about Trump, the reason why I lost it during the coverage of that story is because people in power don't like journalism. They don't like journalists because good journalists hold these elected officials accountable for their actions. They speak truth to power, which is why Putin has been known to target people who are critical of him. And then when you have Trump calling any news organization that's critical of him fake news and Americans buy it, that's really concerning, especially when they think that it would be okay for the government to take broadcasting licenses away from news organizations that the president considers fake news. That is a scary thing to consider, because if you don't have independent journalism, then you're screwed. Democracy no longer exists. People like Trump do not like to be held accountable. They don't like to be criticized. They want to pretend like everything they do is great, when in reality, a lot of what they do is destructive. And it's just scary to know that there is some percentage of Americans that think, yeah, the president should be able to revoke broadcasting licenses from certain organizations.
And when Donald Trump looked up to Daddy Putin when he was a civilian, okay, that's his prerogative, I don't care. But now that he's the president of the country, he has to understand what's in our Constitution. In our Constitution, we have freedom of the press. That means a lot to real Americans. Maybe not to the Russian government, but to Americans, it's all the difference. That's what the heart of this country is. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom. And if Donald Trump doesn't understand that, he's gotta go. If you like this clip of the Young Turks, you know there's a whole live 2-hour show, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern every day, and you can download it or stream it and watch it without ads if you become a member. tytnetwork.com/join.